This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun Cole, but the real star of today's show is the Samsung Odyssey HMD. The Odyssey is a mixed reality VR headset intended for a great variety of VR experiences. The Odyssey is Samsung's latest entry into the world of VR, and it has a few features that actually separate it from its competition. The Odyssey starts out at $499 and is only intended for PC use. To be more specific, Windows 10 PC use. The Odyssey features dual 3.5-inch AMOLED displays, each with 1440 by 1600 resolution, 110-degree viewing angle, spatial 360-degree sound, tracking cameras, and a Bluetooth controller for each hand. Now this review is different than most reviews for this unit you're going to see because we are here to do sim racing. Sure, it comes with some hand controllers, but I'm not even going to be able to use the hand controllers. I don't have Bluetooth on my computer, and we're not doing any shooter games here today. We are here to race. I'm going to be doing this test from my rig. Won't need those controllers. I'm also not going to be worried about moving around the whole room like a lot of VR users will be. This is strictly focused on using the Odyssey for sim racing. Inside of the box, you will find a couple sets of AA batteries, the instruction manuals, 2 hand controllers, one for each hand, and the VR headset itself along with the cleaning rag. Now before we get down to business, let's take a closer look at the Odyssey HMD along with its parts, starting off with the hand controllers that we're not going to be using. There's one for each hand, and you'll know immediately because it only fits in your hand one direction. If you're confused, there is a L or a R on the bottom to help you out. Once in your hand, it has a nice ergonomic feel to it. Within reach of your thumb is a directional pad and a joystick. There's also a menu button and a Windows button. At your index finger, a trigger or lever, and then one more button right under your middle finger. The unit is made of plastic and it's not all that heavy. There is a ring on the front that can be seen in-game to let you know where your hands are, and it also acts as a stand to place them on the table when not in use. The headset itself looks just like other types of VR for the most part, with a few areas of difference. The front of the Odyssey is a glossy black plastic, and then it has 2 forward-facing cameras for tracking movement. From the front shield back is more of a matte finished plastic, and in that shape of the now typical gigantic ski goggle shape seen on most VR units. On the bottom of the goggle portion of the mask are 2 buttons for adjusting the speaker volume, and then a dial to adjust the lenses left or right, or inside and outside in direction. There are also 2 little tiny holes, one on each side, that are part of the microphone array built into the unit. The cushion on the Odyssey is well padded and has an easy to clean pleather type covering. There's a good sized nose indentation with 2 rubber flappers that lightly support that area in a comfortable way. Within the goggles, you see the lenses. They have more of an oval shape to them than other VR units that I have used. The overall construction of the Samsung Odyssey is a little bit different than others. The headband sort of supports or lets the goggles hang in front of your eyes compared to the normal squeezing it onto your face like other units. We'll talk more about fit later, but it is also different in its construction as well. The headband type strap of the Odyssey has a forehead cup shape on the front of the ring. It is well padded and has the same pleather type covering with the cup fitting really nicely on the top of your forehead. The side rails of the headband are slim and midway back hold the adjustable speakers to sit over your ears. The back section of the headband lets the side rails slide in and then has a very thickly padded back piece that is covered in the same material as the front. There is then a dial that will pull the side rails into that back section, and this tightens the headband on your head. The speakers are fairly large and cover the entire main portion of your ears. They are adjustable up and down and then automatically pivot to cover your ears nicely and comfortably. Integrated into the left side of the unit is a 13.1 foot long HDMI and USB 3.0 cable. The overall weight of the Samsung Odyssey is about 645 grams or 1.4 pounds. By comparison, the lightweight Oculus comes in at 470 grams, or just a hair over 1 pound. That means the Odyssey is actually about 40% heavier than the Oculus, just to give you an idea or perspective. Now, when it came to the installation of this VR unit, it's a little bit different if you're accustomed to the Vive or the Oculus, and it does have its own setup. Now, for starters, you need to use Windows 10. For me, that means I had to upgrade my Windows operating system before I could even think about using this. Once I'd made that upgrade, I plugged in the HDMI, I plugged in the USB, and when I walked away, Windows automatically recognized it, loaded the drivers, and fired up the Windows mixed reality environment. For me, it did require a restart for everything to actually work, but once I did, when I put the headset on, it put me in that Windows mixed reality setup screen, and it asked me to look side to side and then all the way down to calibrate the unit. It's having me look side to side. And then it's into the Windows mixed reality lobby where I can interact with my system via voice command, or using the movable dot by looking at things until it clicks or selects what I am looking at. But we're not here to play around with VR, we are here to race. So the next thing I did was I loaded up the Steamvr to be able to play any of the VR compatible games on my list. And at the point that I had everything installed and ready to go is when I first ran into the clunkiness of the Samsung Odyssey, or the Windows mixed reality environment, whatever you want to call it. Navigating is tough. And I even found myself locked into the lobby screen and not being able to get into the game.
I am doing VR, it's just giving me a single screen over there.
I also wasn't that versed in the navigation commands and found myself stuck. After enough attempts, and after 2 hours and 19 minutes of trial and error, I did eventually get everything working, and I was then in my car on the track in Assetto Corsa. And that is when all that trouble became worth that investment of time.
Awesome. Awesome.
So let's come back to the driving in just a moment, but I do want to cover one critical thing. This is all very new tech, and each sim, each game, each scenario you're going to run it through is going to have its own unique setup. There is no one size fits all, just get it running and everything magically works. It could take hours if I were to show you the setup for each sim and the amount of trial and error just to get everything dialed in just right. So just keep that in mind. I think once you're an owner, you have it, you learn those steps, you get it all dialed in, and then it does become simpler. But out of the box, again, there is no one size all. It isn't gonna just plug and play on everything you want it to do. Now, let's get back to driving. Once I did have it all set up and I was on track in the VR unit and driving, then you can see just how awesome it is. On a simple level, it's the same as any other VR unit that you're gonna use. And by that, I mean love it or not, it's gonna blow your mind. And I don't care what videos you've seen of people driving in VR, or what reviews you've heard, or even what I'm going to tell you. There is no way to understand until you've experienced it. Until you've put it on and got that sensation, there's no way to grasp the concept of just what they're all talking about, or what you're seeing when looking at one image, or they're moving around you. It's not the same as being in the head unit. When it comes to that sensation of being in the car, being in our games, there is no comparison to be made over single or triple monitors, projection, or anything. The VR experience is the most in the car feeling that you can possibly achieve, period. It isn't just about being in the car either. This is also the ultimate 3D scenario that you're going to find, and that is a very big deal if you think about it in sim racing. In sim racing, you're using distance as a way to judge braking zones, turn-in points, and the distance between us and our closest competitors. In VR, partially due to that in-the-car feeling, but also due to the nature of 3D viewing, all of those things are enhanced. And as a result, the argument could be made that it would actually make you faster. I find that I hit more apexes, And I mean, I see them go right under my wheels. I find my braking to be better, and there is an improvement in my overall line based on how much better feeling of where I am, that proximity. I am so much more aware of the other drivers around me, and if you think they're on your side, you just need to turn your head and take a look. It's totally natural. This is true when talking about any of the VR units that I have tested, which is limited to this, the Vive, and the Oculus. Now with the Samsung Odyssey HMD, it had a few pros and cons when compared directly to the Vive or the Oculus. The Samsung is a little bit more clearer, and this is actually very noticeable. It's one of the things that has actually been preventing me from jumping on the whole VR train. With the improvements, I can tell you that I am almost there, but there are still some fine moments when that lack of clarity still bothers me, but it's been minimized. The other huge improvement over the others is the screen door effect, or in this case, the lack of screen door effect. Sure, it's there. If you really focus your eyes and you look for it, it is there and you can find it. But that's not what you should be looking for, and the minute you relax, the minute you let go of trying to find the flaws and just concentrate on the beautiful image that you do see, it's hardly noticeable at all. It wasn't even one of my first thoughts when trying this because it's not a factor of concern any longer. The lenses on the Samsung HMD are clearer and brighter in general. I also did not have a single fogged lens in all of my testing. This is not something that I can say for the Oculus or the Vive. But that did come at a cost, and I'm going to cover that in just a moment with some of my issues with the Samsung Odyssey when compared to its competitors. So what are the downsides of the Odyssey? For starters, it's a performance issue. Now I'm running on an i5, water-cooled i5 with a 1080 video card, and it runs Oculus and the Vive rather well. With this, there was a slight decrease in performance. And maybe for those with better computers, it won't be an issue. But I did find the frame rates to be a little low compared to triple screens or the Oculus with the same system. At times it was fine, but at others it would drop. I also found the tracking to be a little slow at times. This can lead to motion sickness type of feeling and can also be worsened by any simultaneous frame rate drop. All in all, I could run my sims like Assetto Corsa and iRacing with total pleasure. But overall, the tracking and the frame rates was a little bit lower than Oculus or the Vive. When it comes to comfort, in some ways the Samsung wins. The headband was comfortable on my head, and this is by far the easiest to put on or to take off of all of the VR units that I've tested. However, there was no way to get the mask sealed on my face. I could easily see daylight under my cheeks, and that took away from some of the immersion. This also prevented the fogging, and it did not cause as much internal temperature increase on me like the Vive and Oculus, as in, I didn't sweat as much using it. The other downside of the Odyssey is its weight. It is heavy by comparison to the Oculus. It comes in at nearly 1.4 times as heavy, and when you combine with that headband style mount, it adds a little bit more wiggle. It's not as sealed on your face, it's not as tight on your face, and that means when you're doing fast turns, you're getting a little bit more movement, and that could be some of the delay in tracking as well. And what becomes a little bit of a second thought when talking VR is the built-in audio. The VR experience is so immersive, and putting the headphones over your ears adds to that immersion over a sound system. I found the speakers to have decent sound and were perfectly comfortable for me. I didn't even notice them being there. They just gave me solid sound, adding to the total cutoff from the real-world immersion that the VR provides. After testing this unit out in a variety of different sims and conditions, I have to tell you, overall, I really did enjoy the VR experience. I mean, to an extent, it showed me the future of VR. It changed my perceptions of VRs, and it still had its own pros and cons. And sometimes, and we're going to cover the pros and cons, or the good and not so good in just a moment, but sometimes you have to think, is it the product on its own? Or in this case, are those compared to monitors? Are they compared to other VR units? There are a lot of different directions to really look at it, and I want to make things a little clear, so let's do our typical good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good. And the good is, it is very clear for a VR unit. Or in other words, good resolution. It's like being in the car. Total immersion. No outside distractions. Better judgment of speed. Better judgment of distance. Better resolution than Oculus or the Vive. Comfortable. Easy to put on, take off, or adjust. Less screen door effect than others. Speakers are pretty good. Easy to set up. No towers or receivers. No fogging. Less overheating than other units I've tested. Volume adjustment on the mask. And now on to the not so good, and this is a little conflicting, because my first one is, it's not as clear as real monitors. So even though on the pros it gets credit for being clearer or higher resolution, in reality it's still not as good a resolution as you're going to get from monitors. Less frame rate, more taxing on your system. Tough to install and get dialed in. Difficult to navigate without the hand controllers. Must have Bluetooth for the hand controllers. Temperamental. Loss of mouse control. Not being able to see my keyboard, my mouse, my shifter, or anything in my room for that matter. Will make some people motion sick. Not as good at tracking as the Oculus or the Vive. Does not work with glasses. Contacts okay. Heavy head unit. Wires are short, more so for moving than sim racing. Must have Windows 10. And now on to the bottom line. And you know, I'm going to be honest with you. I've had this entire show completely scripted. That's the way I usually do my reviews. And one of the things that's taken me so long to do the review of the Odyssey VR is because when it comes to reviewing, for me at least, VR is probably the hardest thing for me to possibly review. And the reason for it is, again, it is a new technology. Overall, all in all, there are so many different ways right now. There is no one way to do VR. Some of them use the stations tracking things. Some have internal cameras. They don't know exactly what the technology is going to be. And until we kind of have like one path, like the combustion engine, everyone worked with a combustion engine for a long time. We didn't have to argue over multiple different varieties. Sure, there are variations. Don't get me wrong here. But there are so many different ways that they're doing VR right now. We are still new. It is still too new to say, hey, throw away your monitors, just jump over to it. Now, for a lot of people, I can totally understand why they do it. Number one, you can get rid of your it doesn't work well with triple screen. So I could have put that on the con. You almost are better off just having a single screen setup. But it means that you can minimize your rig. That is a good thing. And when you take the time to get it dialed in, it did work in just about every scenario, saying VR in general. I'm not even picking favorites when it comes to the VR. Now, when it came to the differences between the Odyssey and the Vive or the Oculus, I'm going to tell you, it's like that sim pizza we did. You almost have to take a portion of each one and put it together to make the perfect VR unit. Because I have yet to test one that I would say, this is my clear-cut favorite. This did things so much better than the Vive or the Oculus. The resolution being improved is essential. I don't like the clarity that I get in the Vive or the Oculus. The VR experience is amazing, but for me, I need it to be more clear, and just having that obstacle in my mind prevents me from signing on to it full time. The resolution here is fantastic by comparison. I mean, it's a little better, but it only took a little better. The screen door being minimized that much is enough to be an improvement that I'm like, VR is the future. I don't get car sick. But the tracking in this made me a little bit car sick. Just a teeny tiny bit. But when comparing it to the Vive or the Oculus that I don't have that problem with, this was worse. Excuse me. Furthermore, this was very comfortable for me to work with. Now, everybody has a different size head, so it depends on you. For me, this was comfortable, but again, it didn't seal the mask on my face. Now, that is exactly why it didn't fog up. So it was an improvement, but seeing daylight wasn't good. Not having it firmly on my face at this weight and that extra wiggle was not good. So again, I'll take the lenses. I'll take the resolution, but I need the performance of the Oculus simultaneous. I might need external tracking to get what I really need out of it, because when the tracking's not right, it leads to motion sickness. So is VR here? Yes. And for those who can dedicate, as a streamer, for me, it's completely different. I'm not entertained watching people do the VR, and I don't even mean offense to those who stream in VR, but the way I do my show, it's a better benefit for you that I'm not in VR, I think. So it prevents me from really doing it. But at some point, when VR gets so good, I can tell you, you're just going to have to suffer through watching me drive that way. Because the experience, I said it earlier, until you've done it, you cannot be told what's the feeling is like. If you've ever been in a real VR experience, whether it's at a theme park, movies don't do it because it's beyond 3D. It's 3D on top of immersion and being there in a way that 3D cannot do. It is the most mind-blowing, amazing thing, and it is how I want to drive. I can tell you that I'm faster with it. I put in enough laps now that I know that if I was fully dedicated to it, I'm faster. But it still has those little idiosyncrasies, tracking. Even with the Oculus, I get that head popping out of the car sensation, and then I have to reset the view real quick. Not being able to see my peripherals. These are all still the kind of issues that prevent me from saying you gotta have it. Now in the end, it's inexpensive by comparison to triple monitors. Performance side, you still need as good a graphics card, if not better, to run the VR, even though it's not the same amount of pixels as triple screens. So the reason I wanted to ad-lib or freestyle this ending is because I wanted you to understand the real predicament that I'm in when trying to review VR as an overall technology, or as in comparison the Odyssey to the Vive to the Oculus. It's not that easy, especially when I can't really show you what I'm feeling, and that would be a big help. All in all, the simplicity of this is a huge pro. Not having to set up towers. Depending on your situation, the tracking wasn't terrible. It's gonna be a good VR experience, but maybe in a tighter environment, less things that can make it go wrong. The Windows mixed reality world that you're in is still clunky to me. You need to use these to get in and out of things easy, I think. And I don't have Bluetooth on my computer, and I wasn't gonna be doing any games with this. So that is also different about this review, and I said that at the very beginning. And that is another factor compared to VR versus fixed monitors. So again, long-winded ending, but I hope you really got a good sensation of my true overall thoughts on VR and the Odyssey, Samsung Odyssey HMD in general. I hope I've answered any questions that you might have. If I didn't, feel free to contact me and maybe I can answer those questions on the fly for you. That's going to do it. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.